Welcome to SikhCast, brought to you by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.
This episode of the SikhCast is from a live webinar entitled 1947 South Asia, Punjab, and Sikhs, featuring presenters Harinder Singh, Amandeep Singh Sandhu, and Tridivesh Singh Mani. The event originally aired on August 13, 2022.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Thank you for tuning in to today's webinar hosted by the Sikh Research Institute. Thank you. Today's webinar is 1947 South Asia, Punjab and Sikhs. This webinar will begin with a moderated discussion between our panelists, after which we'll have time for Q&A from the audience. So please drop your questions in the chat box and be sure to include your name and city. I'll be throwing in periodic reminders for questions. Now I'd like to quickly introduce today's panelists. We'll start with Amandeep Singh Sandhu, who's completed his master's in English literature. For the past few years, he has written for the media and contributed to anthologies. Punjab Journeys Through Fault Lines is his first nonfiction book. He is currently a Homi Bhabha Fellow working on a book on Sikhs outside Punjab, but within India. I know that he has two cats that have taken over his life. I'm sure he'll share a little bit about them, maybe even sharing their names. Next, we have Harinder Singh. Harinder Singh is a thinker, author, and educator. He's the co-founder and innovation director at the Sikh Research Institute. If you've tuned into a webinar before, you know about his love for single origin light roast coffee, which we got to get to know that side of Harinder Singh at Siddiq for the past 2 weeks. His current focus is on availing the message of the Guru Granth Sahib to global populations and developing critical thinking in Sikh institutions. He currently resides in the United States with his family. And lastly, we have Tridivesh Singh, who is a New Delhi-based policy analyst. He co-authored Humanity Amidst Insanity, Hope During and After the Indo-Pak Partition, and is one of the editors of Warriors After War, Indian and Pakistani retired military leaders reflect on relations between the two countries, past, present, and future. He shared with us that he's a cricket and Punjabi music buff. Maybe that'll come up today, maybe it won't. You'll have to tune in to see where our conversation goes. Again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and I'll pass it to Harinder Singh.
Thank you, Manvinder, and Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh, and greetings of the day, depending on where you are on the globe, from a morning to the evening. The conversation today really is going to be between Tridivesh and Amandeep. It's actually an outcome and an outgrowth of conversations we've been having since earlier this year, since the Punjab elections. And what we have been talking about has been changing. So I want to be just upfront about what we are doing today. We've been talking about what's happening within the Indian side of Punjab, which is what we are used to since 1966. But as this is a partition's 75th year anniversary, we are also we are aware of it, that what has happened since 1849 in case of Punjab and the Sikhs, when Punjab was annexed, and when the British left in 47, the two larger nations of India and Pakistan were born. And there's a lot of history attached to all of those things. So we actually will not be covering things related to both sides of the border as much as we would like, because that's not our expertise, but we will touch upon it. And where we need to, we will invoke the historical accounts, but largely we are focused on post-1947, after the Radcliffe line was drawn arbitrarily, essentially, by the British. And after 47, we are largely going to be looking at the Indian side of Punjab, and within there are certain Sikh aspirations and dissatisfactions as well. That said, before we begin our conversation, I woke up this morning and I looked at, as a personal practice, the hukum from Sri Amritsar Sahib, and it was Todi Mahalla Panjwa today. It's very interesting because Todi is one of those rags, depending on how it's sung, it could be very mournful and sad, or it could be very festive and playful. I think that's sort of what we are going to be looking at when we talk about Punjab and Sikhs. And when we look at what happened in 66 to 47 to 84 to 1849. And we can go, 3,000 years back when it was Harappan civilization as the Indus Valley civilization. And you're going to find that playfulness or sadness throughout the times. And we are seeing the same things even in the last 6 months. So in this conversation, what we wanted to focus on was actually the Hukum Pahda, let me mention. And the line which Guru Arjan Sahib starts with is that, that there is a grip. We are caught up in a particular grip, and the grip is of the pride. Garab geheldo mudlo hiore. So this idea of, hey, are you caught up in the grip of pride? I think that's kind of instructive, at least for me, what Guru Arjan Sahib, whose project was in Punjab, and his project included both Amritsar and Lahore, it tells us about when we are in the grip of pride, how we need the Maharaj. And the Maharaj for Guru Arjan Sahib is that Ikovankar, the creative force. And hopefully some of that we can invoke today too. So to start with, we're going to be looking at some of the current trends. And just not because there's no... we cannot say anything for certain. Things are always volatile, they're always bloody, they're always muddy, there is a nuancing needed. So, but what we do know at this point is that there is a significant section of Panjabis and the Sikhs who feel estranged. And what are the historical, cultural, and geopolitical trade, including economic context and the realities of current times, especially in the context of last couple of years, maybe last 5 years? And how can these trends which we're going to be talking about, how can they be addressed given the current realities? So it's in this context, I would like to start a conversation with Mr. Mani and Mr. Sandhu. I personally just call him Tridesh and Amandeep. And we will keep it more conversational. So to start with, Tridesh, the first question I have is for you. And we've been talking about some of these things. And again, we have gone back and forth on some of this. But I want to start with some glimmers of hope over the last few years. Because sometimes we lose hope, and if we don't have those hopes, then everything looks extremely dark. And even when it is extremely dark, we still need those lights of hope. So one of the glimmers of the hope of the last 5 years, 10 years has been the Kartarpur corridor. And you've been writing about it, you've been speaking about it. Can you actually put it in the larger context of South Asia and the globe? What this, the so-called, the most dangerous border in the world, what was providing when the Kartarpur corridor opened up?
At the outset, thank you for giving me this opportunity. And Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. So there are a couple of things. First of all, it's, there is, if you look at the last 5 years, you very rightly pointed out that if you look at the subcontinent and India and Pakistan in general, in particular, the relationship has been rather frosty, and there have been minimal areas where there have been exchanges. That is always the case, but from 2019 onwards especially, the relationship has only gone downhill. But in the midst of this, we had the inauguration of Sri Kartarpur Sahib Religious Corridor in November 2019. Then this was closed down for a year and a half from March 2020 till about November 2021. Now, ever since the reopening of the corridor in November 2021, obviously, the devotees have once again got a chance, to pay obeisance, to go for darshan. That is obvious, and that is that is a very important part of the corridor. But what has also happened is the corridor has, resulted in numerous reunions of, for instance, separated families, and this number goes into hundreds. Now, the effort has largely been put in by civil society. So, for instance, the Panjabi Leher, which has been carrying out YouTube interviews of survivors on both sides, that has played a pivotal role in ensuring that individuals can get reunited from both sides. And about a few days ago, there was a similar case where a 92-year-old Sikh gentleman from East Punjab got reunited with his nephew, probably the only surviving member of the family. So this is, I think, a very important corridor, the religious corridor, is important not just in the context of India-Pakistan relations, in giving a push to people ties, but also giving hope at a time when not just in South Asia, but globally, the narrative is becoming more insular. When you looked at globalization in the 1990s about open borders and a general openness, there is a total reversal of that. So what is happening now, as I said, one is obviously, irrespective of what the political establishments want, it is the efforts of the civil society and people. But it's a very important narrative, which is important in the global context about how civil society can play an important role and how they have made an effective use of technology, of social media. So there are multiple angles to this. And then, of course, the recent, I think, a very important step by the Jathedar of the Sri Akal Takht Sahib also, that, that will be an ardas for all those who actually bore the brunt of partition, large numbers of individuals, Hindus, Sikhs and Muslims. I think that is also a very important intervention. So both in the context of the region and in a global context, I think this is a message which really, this is a new narrative which is being set. And today it may seem to be very far-fetched, but it is very important and is a model actually for conflict resolution, which is driven by civil society and by organic efforts.
Yeah, thank you for bringing in even the recent comments, of Gyani Harpreet Singh, the acting Jathedar of Akal Takht Sahib, as appointed by SGPC. This part is, I think it's also indicative of where Sikhs are and the Sikh politics is also, or Sikh religiosity for that matter. Because in 47, obviously we know the Hindus, Muslims and Sikhs, Havan bhi ban gayi, we actually went crazy. As communities, as individuals within the communities, they were killing each other. It's the largest migrations. And on both sides, you're going to hear on 14th and 15th speeches from Islamabad and Delhi as to what the nations have accomplished. But I think when Jathedar Akal Takht is invoking this sentiment of Ardas, I think this is where Sikhs are. Our only thing we are able to do currently in terms of making contribution is invoke what Kartarpur corridor was invoking. It's like at the time of Guru Nanak Sahib, it was bridging of the two civilizations as well, right? What you had, the larger, what we now call the Hindu civilization, which really is the South Asian elements. And it's a addressing of the larger Islamic civilization, which was coming through the Semitic traditions to Punjab. Let me actually move this into history. And just for our audience, we're going to go back and forth between Pradesh and Amandeep, between geopolitics, economics, trade, history, and the current contemporary realities as well. And at the end, for last half hour, we will be taking your questions as well. So Amandeep, in this context, let me actually bring, which is on many people's mind, and it is definitely in your mind, you and I talk about this quite often, that Punjab, in 75 years and last 10 years again, or last 40 years, Punjab seems to be sort of settled terms for battle is how you put it, but not for systems. So how can Punjab move from this reactive politics to proactive politics? And what I mean by that is post-47, there have been movements in Punjab, including the ones which are led by Sikhs, but within the confine of India. And post-47, in 75 years, in last 40 years, last 60 years, since Punjabi Suba movement, Punjab has always been that reactive politics. So when you're looking for, are Punjabis led by Sikhs ready for some systematic things, or are they only going to be just settling terms for battles?
When I, first of all, thank you for inviting me and greetings to all. Sat Sri Akal. When I was doing my book, one of our common friends said to me that, what you will see in Punjab in the last 150 years has been going on for 3,000 years. And that is to do with the geography of Punjab, that's to do with the location of Punjab, that's to do with Punjab being the gateway to the Indian subcontinent, the channel, the path through which everybody was coming in. And I personally see, one of the reasons to do the book was 25 years after militancy, has peace returned to Punjab? And I don't see peace returning. In fact, I discovered that the discontent had grown much larger. Um, yes, Punjab is primed for battle because it has to fight. It doesn't have an option. See, this Punjab, current Punjab in India, Punjab, is part of an Indian nation, and the way the nation deals or Delhi deals with Punjab, Punjab ends up responding to that. The unfortunate thing is that, say, before independence or post independence for 2, 3 decades, Punjab was dictating certain terms. But now, the way militancy was dealt with, and after that, we have lost that space to be able to dictate terms. If you look back at Anandpur Sahib resolution, it was a far thinking, very good resolution, a thing that India needed, a greater federal structure, diversification of crops, all sorts of rights for people, for workers. But the center has an interest in sub in subduing such thoughts, such ideas coming from Punjab. And then after that, it all became what we know the history that we have seen in the post 1966 Punjab. But I think what has happened here is we need to notice is that this is what a colonial power would do. This is what Britishers did with India. This is what current regimes will do with Punjab. And what do they work on? As the Shabad by Guru Arjan Sahib today, they work on your pride. And they work in creating factionalism within you. Punjab is deeply divided over who is left and who is Panthik. And it is divided on caste, it's divided on gender, it's divided on many other things. I think at some point, all Punjabis and the Sikhs need to acknowledge that these are our issues together. And we need to own our issues. What goes on in Punjab is blame game. You did this, so I did this. That has to cease because we can't go on blaming each other while our battles are somewhere else. And that battle is getting, Punjabi कहते हैं तिखी हो रही है वो लड़ाई. And that is happening right now. As we will discuss in the evening, I think what Hindutva India is doing to Punjab is dire for Punjabis. And we need to learn to handle this. And I think we'll come to it as we progress in our talk. But one thing I would add is, given whatever has happened recently, I remember you invited me 2 years back to this talk, and I had said that Punjab needs to create a bank of its own. We used to have the Punjab National Bank one time, but we now need a bank of our own. We, of course, need truth and reconciliation over those decade and a half of militancy that has happened, because just today 2 police officers have been given punishment in the CBI court. These are very small, and 30 years later they have been given punishment. You can imagine how much is the pain in Punjab. We need to create a bank. Manisa will talk about cross-border trade, which I think is very important, but I would talk about a linguistic unity between the 2 Punjabs, which is actually the 10th biggest language in the world, and then look at trade from that. We can discuss it more. But I think right now, we have seen what happened in the elections, and we have seen what has happened after the elections with a new party in Punjab. There is a dire need for Punjab to have a local, Punjab-focused political party. And I can't overemphasize the need for this. To happen in Punjab, happen now, happen today, should have happened yesterday. Because in 2 years, we have Lok Sabha elections, another 4.5 years, we have state elections. And unless we have a people who represent us, truly represent us, I don't think we can make gains against a nation the way it has become now.
Amandeep, you invoked various elements in here. In fact, jad tusi battle di gal kar rahe ho, Punjabi vich Shah Muhammad has written that Jangnama. Even then he wrote that with the British it was a Jang Hind Punjab, and the Sikh sentiments have invoked that since 84 as well. So the battle part remains, and I think the 2 things you are bringing to the table, one is coming back to this idea of bank, Punjab and Sindh Bank, and then eventually Bank of Punjab. In fact, that's been in the news for the last 2 years as well. And you added to it essentially a regional political party in the Indian Punjab. And the larger on the both sides of border, this idea of what really is Punjabi nationalism now, people who show up on the both sides of the border where the freedom at midnight actually didn't strike, although it remained a good book. What is their vision? What is their next version? And I think, as you both well know, that historically we didn't have, you invoked left again as well. There was a time in Punjab that the premier of Punjab, equivalent to prime minister today, was a unionist party leader who was a Muslim man. Although he represented elite interests, but still that was the kind of Punjab, even under the British, it was developing. So these battles, what is the next battle? I think they'll get nuanced, and what you're saying is the political party in the Indian Punjab. Some consolidation is needed there. But I want to actually take the next question to still you, because you brought up an interesting point when you opened it up today. And you basically said Punjab does lead certain things. Punjab, and you brought it from a Hindutva angle, even in last 7 years, we are seeing through the farmers' protest how that has happened. So the question is that how come the Hindi-speaking regions of India, current India, how come have they taken into the quagmire as well? Why is it that only Punjab and maybe to a certain extent Bengal, and we have talked about Kerala and Tamil Nadu, they do speak, but what shall Punjab do? Are you saying that in the current scenario, is India doomed from the perspective of where the Hindutva politics has taken? And why is it that the confrontation is then, because there's a cost of it, it becomes versus Sikhs rather than Punjab because of the Sikh symbolisms and Sikh leadership and influences at certain levels? Can you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, 2 or 3 things here. I mean, frankly, if India goes the way it is going, I think it is doomed. There is no doubt in my mind. Because whatever, Taranga and all that you are doing right now, a politician said, she said, instead of looking at GDP, you are looking at DP now, the picture on social media. I mean, it has all become a politics of propaganda, a politics of hate, and there has been no focus really on any kind of development in the last 8 years. In fact, before this current party came to power, India was just poised. I'm not saying it was doing very well. It was just in 2013-14, just poised to take the next step into becoming a better economy. But after that, starting from demonetization until now, we've just been slipping down. Of course, COVID did its damage. But the point is that whose politics is this? This whole cow politics. It belongs to these central 5-6 states. And let us look at those states. I mean, they are lowest on developmental indices, and they're taking the rest of the country down where they are. And that is threatening to me because, I mean, it's not only Punjab, of course, because Punjab is at that critical place. Kashmir, look at the Kashmir, 3 years. Nothing has happened after abrogation of the Article 370 and 35A. Or look at South Indian states. I live in Bangalore. Or look at Northeast India. All these other regions are sort of struggling on how to not fall into this quagmire, as you use the word, which has developed in the center of India. And that is extremely, scary, a prospect to look at. Because I tell you what is happening, and this is what my very important concern is that since 1973, India has had delimitation of seats in the parliament. Now they're building this new parliament with, somebody says it will have 1,000 seats, But the point is that in the last 5 decades, the population has grown. And political constituencies have irregular populations. Like Central Delhi has more than 10 lakhs. Lakshadweep has some 50,000, So there is a need for delimitation, definitely. But the irony, 3-4 decades back when the 5-year plans used to be there, southern states followed them. They followed family planning, they followed industrial development, They followed greater education for people. And now their populations have shrunk. While these 5-6 states, their population has ballooned. So if you have to give seats on the basis of number of people, they will easily get 50 to 70 seats more, and the southern states will lose them. And where is Punjab in all this? Its growth rate has been steady, but it won't get more than 13 MPs or maybe 15 MPs it will get. But if the other MPs have become 700-800, then look at where will we be. We are already very small, and we will further shrink. And that is the crisis in my mind. It is a study, I don't know for sure, but by 2026, Uttar Pradesh alone, which is 22 crore people now, will actually, by 2026, will have 33% of parliamentary seats. Like, look at where it is going. What needs to be scrapped is this first past the post. What needs to be brought in is proportional representation. And I'll take it back to 1931, to Master Tara Singh saying at that time that we need proportional representation. Instead of all those things happening, we are now going back to a place where these 5-6 states will dictate every single policy in the hands of these 2+2 from Gujarat. And I mean, this will become a basically, I don't want to use another continent's name, but this won't remain the market the world wants to see, 1 billion strong. People have no money to spend. There is no disposable income. FIIs are pulling out right now. So I think we are looking at beyond doom. We are looking to be in a place where my fear is there will be food riots. There will be, pure mafias on the roads, local thugs who will rule, and those thugs will be in a pecking order to hire thugs, And that is extremely scary place to be in, from one of the democracies which had a little bit of hope, a little bit of faith in 1947 to, in 75 years, come down here. Huge fall.
Well, thank you for that nuancing. I think most of the audience members would appreciate that. I don't think we are able to see, most of us, Punjab's 13 MPs currently in context of the larger Indian parliament, which is running into 500 something, which you were saying based on the population growths and the policy dictates are heading into somewhere around 700s in coming decade, which will be led by these Hindi-speaking, largely Hindutva forces. So you invoke this Master Tara Singh, and for coming back to the pre-47 conversations a little bit, this is what the dilemma for the Sikh leadership was. Then when this Westminster-style democracy is being brought into South Asia, when Professor Puran Singh is writing an open letter to Sir John Simon, he's essentially saying this, that you don't have these representatives who mean well for individuals. They're going to create and make India into something else. And we are seeing that 75 to 90 years later, the writing is on the wall. It's exactly what Puran Singh was saying and what Tara Singh and Khadak Singhs were facing when they were looking at which battles to fight and who to side with. And these were some of the dilemmas of democratic systems which were being given to the colonies without preparing, quote unquote, those colonies which the West had ruled over and enslaved. Let me, Iqbal has written somewhere that Jamhuriyat ek tamasha hai, Jamhuriyat is democracy, and I think we are seeing those tamashas, those plays being unfolded right in front of our eyes on both sides of the border. You just talked about this. We don't have representatives to talk on the other side, but both states are converging. One already is a security state, and one is becoming a security state. One is trying to come out of security state, at least they foreshadowed that in the last 2-3 years. And one is going more and more toward acting like a populist security state. And in this context, I want to go to Tridesh a little bit, that there is a global crisis going on. World is seeing what India is becoming. State Department had to change certain things and how it looks at who's ruling India and who's ruling Pakistan, and the interesting side of the politics on both sides of the border. And there's a Ukrainian war going on. There are conversations and politicking at United Nations, as some of us jokingly now call untied nations. But there is a global geopolitical situation with the Ukraine crisis. Wheat has been talked about that. I remember when I've been going back and forth since 84 between the both sides of the border of Wagah-Atari borders between the eastern and western Punjab. Cement was a big issue that trade had stopped 4 years ago based on what was happening between the two nations. What are the imperatives for trade between India and Pakistan, which goes directly through Punjab?
Okay, so before we come to the contemporary part, I'd just like to bring in a bit of history. I think it may be relevant for our current conversation. So even after 47, obviously there was a lot of bloodshed. There was a lot of so much suffering, trauma, and everything else. But if you actually look at the interactions, a few years after partition, between say 47 and if you look at trade, for instance, between 47 and the early 50s, and then if you look at people-to-people contact from the late 40s onwards till 65, it was, you cannot think of that today. Today we are looking at, for many years we've been invoking EU, we've been looking at ASEAN and things like that. But you had, for instance, Punjab itself had 2 land crossings, not just Wagah-Atari. You also had Hossainiwala and what is Kasur, or also referred to as Ganta Singhwala on the other side. And if you look at in the early 50s itself, when people actually met, at during cricket matches or hockey matches, or when they had gone even on pilgrimages or other purposes, there was a lot of, they met with a lot of bonhomie. So one question which I would just like to raise is it the people or is it the the political classes of both countries? Very simple. I don't want to get into it, because otherwise what explains the fact that even after so much of acrimony, so much of hostility, just after 47 you have that sort of interaction. So that is the first part. Now coming to the present, I think as such, if you look at it, looks it depends upon which vantage point you look at it from. If you look at it from the point of the political elite in India, obviously it makes no sense that because actually bilateral trade between both countries is happening via Dubai and Singapore. And here I would like, it's not just political lobbies in India, you have other vested interests outside as well who don't really want the trade via Wagah-Atari or via the Punjab. So there are a number of lobbies involved who don't want. Now, I think what has happened over the past year is that, as you very rightly pointed out, even before Ukraine, the Ukraine crisis, there was a ceasefire between India and Pakistan. Now, obviously, US played an important role in that. The Saudis played an important role in that. There were other geopolitical factors. And in 2021 itself, there was talk of the resumption of trade. And actually, Imran Khan had first given a go-ahead to it. And then, some members of his cabinet, they objected to it. They linked it to the revocation of Article 370 in Jammu and Kashmir. But there have been some signals that, again, there's no real, in fact, no IR expert can answer it, but what, in the subcontinent, things happen in a very organic manner. I think one signal was October last year, the cricket match between India and Pakistan, which was played with less sort of hostility, right? So that was one thing. Now, after that, obviously, after November 2021, the reopening of the corridor, the sort of media coverage it's getting, the fact that visas are being issued, and even after the reopening, the number of visas being issued to religious pilgrims, for instance, has been increased. Now, coming to the next step, I think it's purely about economics. Basically, obviously, the Pakistani consumer will benefit because Pakistan has been buying essential commodities at much larger prices. And if you look at it, first of all, from Punjab's perspective, there are a lot of people who are, unfortunately, even within Punjab, when we build the case, there are a lot of people who are very skeptical, saying that it really doesn't benefit Punjab because the larger number of goods actually is from outside. But bilateral trade has really helped the tertiary sector. So the snapping of trade ties, for instance, resulted in impacting about 9,000 to 10,000 families in the border belt, because in the tertiary sector there were so many job losses. So the imperatives are very clear. I mean, it also, apart from the resistance which will come, from certain lobbies outside Punjab and the central government, even within, I think, apart from two members of parliament, the member of parliament from Amritsar, and earlier, obviously not, I think Navjot Sidhu was very vocal, and now Sardar Simranjit Singh Mann also spoke about this issue. But this needs to be raised the issue needs to be articulated in a consistent manner. And I think this is, from a very realistic point of view, the reopening of trade at this point is a low-hanging fruit, especially via the Wagah-Tari border. Irrespective of all the opposition, this is something which, beyond a point, if there is a people's movement, if there's pressure, if the business lobbies get together. Now, the way it's conducted, creating impediments, all that all is a different thing. But the reopening, first of all, via Wagah-Tari is a possibility. And in fact, earlier governments have even been speaking about opening other trade routes. Now, the problem is that over the past few months, there has been no verbal mention also of certain issues. So trade, for instance, I mean, to be fair, irrespective whichever government was there was at least some mention of bilateral trade with Pakistan. Similarly, there was talk about, connectivity and, increasing the air connectivity with other countries and so on and so forth. So first of all, this has to be part of the narrative. Then a proper narrative, a people's movement should be built around this, like around other issues. The farmers' movement had also spoken about bilateral trade. It was restricted to agricultural commodities. So I think everybody needs to get together, and I think everybody will benefit. It's not that any one particular section will benefit. So it needs to be articulated in that sense.
Definitely. And, this is, well, let's see, the Pakistani side of Punjab, Chaudhry Parvez Elahi is back. He had shown his affinity much more toward Panjabis and Sikhs. I remember meeting him in mid-2000s. I think it was 2006-07 at the time. And I remember before it was Bidor was even talked about at this level, or there was a plan to open up and do constructions, although we have our own reservations on what they really did there. Parvez Elahi was the one who was actually ordering the building of the road to Nankana Sahib from Lahore. So on this side, we have Bhagwan Singh Mann and his complexities, and perhaps the two state leaderships can work with their national leaderships to see what can really be opened up here. But I think there is everyone won't do it unless the state works on certain policies. And I think sometimes it's not just the nationalistic polity, the PMs on the both sides, it's the CMs on the both sides, possibly in some conjunction with working with the governors who can make this happen. So, Radesh, I want to continue on this thread a little bit more. So, Amritsar, even in Sikh history, especially from the time of Guru Arjan Sahib, it had become a much bigger economic center as well. These days when we look at from a Sikh sentiments, people mostly look at this is where Darbar Sahib complex is, this is where Akal Takht is, and this is the hub of Sikh activity. Sardar Kapoor Singh called it that this is the theopolitical hub of all Sikh activities. But what is more important in this conversation, what you're bringing up, trade route related and economics related, that Amritsar, several markets were also built by Guru Arjan Sahib. And in fact, from the Guru Arjan period onward, Amritsar had become, it had even overtaken to some extent Lahore with its activities. A lot of that has been lost in the last 75 years as well. So more specifically, how can the greater connectivity with Amritsar, between Amritsar and Lahore, help in engaging a more, even more important economic hub for Punjab? Because economic activities is what ends up trumping everything in the world today. We can talk about human rights, but economically, if they're powerful, it kind of connects with what Amandeep had said. You need banks, Sikhs can work towards it. But what does that connectivity look like? Can you offer more specifics on it? What kind of things can the chief ministers and the governors with their PMs can work on to create this better connectivity which goes through Amritsar and Lahore?
So I think there's no one project per se. It has to be, so when you look at the connectivity between Amritsar and Lahore, if you look at, obviously there have been so many gaps, and at this point of time, the integration is so minimal that it has to be a series of projects. So, and in fact, one is, here I would like to mention that one is the bilateral part, right? The India-Pakistan itself. What I would also, what I have been keeping a close watch on earlier is that, as you very rightly pointed out, that Amritsar actually was part of the broader Silk Road, right? So now, when I alluded earlier to the part about air connectivity, that was important because when we talk about Wagah-Atari trade via Wagah-Atari, that is one part. And obviously, as I said, the Pakistani consumer benefits. He gets essential commodities at much cheaper prices. Specifically, the tertiary sector of the border belt, whether it's hotels, and then alongside you have infrastructure, generation of jobs, all that happens. A lot, as far as other benefits of Punjab are concerned, it also depends upon the local level of industrialization. So obviously, as I said, there is a technicality in that. The larger number of goods, first of all, a smaller number of goods is allowed via the land routes. That even when the trade was on, not too many goods were allowed by the land route. Secondly, obviously, the commodities were from other industrialized states in India. But here, what can happen is that first of all, there is a revival of the trade route, revival of trade between Wagah and Atari, and then alongside, air connectivity of Amritsar is enhanced with Iran. It's already there with some Central Asian countries, but very limited. So with Iran, Central Asia, when for instance, even there is now Afghanistan also wants to normalize its economic relations with other countries. So in the long run, even that air connectivity is needed. So Amritsar needs to be looked at as a economic hub, not just from the context of from the land route, but as a multimodal sort of economic hub. And in fact, the US vision of the Silk Road, which ultimately didn't materialize, it had actually spoken about, it had referred to the importance of Amritsar as a regional economic hub. And then later on, there was even talk at one stage when ties between India and China had not soured so much that that there will be, if the relationship between India and Pakistan in terms of trade improves, that some common ground can be found with CPEC. I think that is passé now. So in the current geopolitical situation, the land route, that will obviously benefit Amritsar, Gurdaspur, the border belt in job creation, giving some support to the economy. And air connectivity, I think, is very important. And given the economic and geopolitical changes taking, and as you see the shift, the economic center also, if you look at the economic thrust, it is moving away now to different parts of the world. So a lot of diasporas also in other, not just in the West, but in the Middle East, in Southeast Asia, they can benefit. And even when we look at selling of agricultural commodities, if you have air connectivity, automatically you get more markets. In fact, there's been reference also that if you want to sell agricultural commodities to the Middle East, you want to sell to other parts. So air connectivity is very essential.
Well, that's a great point. On the both sides, not just the way you are invoking, making Amritsar a little bit of a more regional hub beyond India and Pakistan as well, but even within India, I mean, if you look at it, we don't even have flights from Chandigarh to Amritsar currently. We would love to see that, and then from Chandigarh to Lahore, and Chandigarh to Islamabad, or Amritsar to Islamabad, because those will allow for the things that you are talking about. But moving on to my next part, it will also allow politicians to get into these modes, and they can demand that from within their countries, within their PMs. And the politician I invoke because, even at the time of Guru Nanak Sahib, I'm just recalling this right now, there was a Sikh of Guru Nanak who had traveled from Punjab near Kartarpur all the way to Sangladeep, today Sri Lanka, to do trade work. He was a businessman who used to go for a couple of months a year to do those things. And it was his behavior and his leadership which had connected a king of Sri Lanka with the ideas of Punjab through Guru Nanak Sahib's Shabad. And that context, I am going to come back to Amandeep. Amandeep, politicians, we just got onto that. Let's look at, we have current CMs who are, well, we have a new CM, Chief Minister in Punjab, on the Indian side of Punjab, and we have a old timer Chaudhary who has come back as the CM of the Western Punjab. Within the Indian side of Punjab, the political consciousness has been rising. It has definitely been rising slowly and steadily since 90s, but much more so in last 5 years. And it's very much clear based on the data of both the Punjab elections as well as the national elections, MPs and MLAs is what I'm referring to. Earlier, and we had this conversation, and in this, they uprooted the old politicians in last elections. The vulnerability and not using the arms and not playing into the state's games, that's been commendable. The state earlier used to physically kill Sikhs and Punjabis, but now they're doing it not just to Sikhs and Punjabis, but also to Sikhs and Punjabis. They're cutting the vices. In this reality, in this new political consciousness, what can the people of Punjab do? What can Punjabis and Sikhs do?
Well, I think this rising political consciousness reflected and developed as well. Both things happened simultaneously during the Kisan Morcha, and I think it was a great time, to present ourselves in a very different league, not only to India but to the world as well. Of course, many rifts that we talked about earlier, nothing gets fully bridged, but at least they came together for this agenda. But what happened was something more than that. That the sense of whether Congress or Akalis, they are not indestructible. That the average Punjabi learned it. And that is why we saw what happened in the elections. I mean, that kind of hit to every stalwart leader from the two traditional parties. I think the election result was a growing of that political consciousness reflected in an electoral space. Sadly, the options were not too much, and the guys in waiting got the power. I'm saying sadly because, very frankly, we aren't seeing in the last 6 months the kind of governance Punjab needed at this stage. When the elections happened, somebody interviewed me and I said, Punjab has voted at the edge of its political choices. And beyond that is what? And that is why I'm saying, as I earlier said, the need for a local party. But what you said that they were killing us earlier, and now they're killing our voice, even then they were killing our voice. The Delhi-based state-controlled media was either blanking out the Sikh point of view, the Punjab crisis, the entire argument for it was either blanked out or misrepresented. And all those guys, we know the main characters who did that here in the 70s, 80s, even 90s. But during the farmers' protest, now we were pitted against a much more powerful corporate-controlled media, which was pro-state, because largely the ownership of this media was going to benefit from the farm laws if they had been implemented. And Punjab also had a whole new generation which has become savvy with internet, which has got educated, which has learned how to do things. Earlier, in the previous period of crisis, we were focusing on the battle on ground. But now we learned that battles are also of narratives. And I think in the Kisan Morcha, the Punjab excelled the narrative battle. In fact, it finally won because not only within Punjab, which was in Punjabi, but into North India with Haryana, Rajasthan, West UP in Hindi, or even across the country or internationally, everywhere the farmers' point of view went through. And even now, I mean, you look at Europe, what is happening now, like the Dutch, the Italians, the Polish, the Germans, they're all protesting. Because there was a sense, and I'm not saying that the Kisan Morcha was the only time it came up, and for the last 15 years, there have been unions who have been fighting. But this developing a narrative, to me, that is a strength. So when, say, Musewala's song is removed or Kanwar Garewal's song is removed, look at what happens. I mean, Bandi Singh becomes an issue in the parliament. Until now, it hadn't. Now, the media which created this, part of it went off to the new government which came. Yet there is some media which remains independent, which walks a razor's edge. And I think if Punjab has to succeed, it has to support this media. It has to support narratology of Punjab. That is very important for us. And this voice, if it can build, it's okay. Some YouTube removal doesn't matter. I mean, by the time they remove from YouTube, everybody has downloaded it on their mobile phones. In fact, many times banning actually makes the thing more popular. But that they can continue doing. But the sense that Punjab should now have is, and again I'll go back to focus on our issues, own our issues, and then fight that battle of narratives. Because that is where we have continued to win. And we must keep winning that.
That's a great point, Aman, that the narrative, I actually invoke many a time when I'm having Sikh conversations, which are actually for a global benefit, that Guru Nanak's narrative is born out of Ikko Onkar. This idea of that there is oneness, this all creative and pervasive force is among all 7.5 billion people.
Yeah, so, I mean, taking back to, it was very interesting what you talked about, I mean, developing Amritsar as a hub. I wanted to know, I'm sorry, I don't remember clearly, but what is happening with Raja Sansi? Is it being developed or is it being curbed right now?
Okay, so I think the biggest challenge for Raja Sansi is it's not just, one is Indira Gandhi International Airport, there's been this demand about direct flights. Now, even within Punjab, most of the flights are being, rather than Raja Sansi, Mohali Airport is being given preference. Now, that is all right. I mean, I'm not saying that, but Mohali, obviously, that benefits, it services tourists from other parts. I mean, not just from Punjab, from Chandigarh and from other states as well. The ultimate benefit for Punjab, and as I said, even if tomorrow trade opens up and you need to think of it in a, regional sort of context, you need to have both land trade and you need to have air connectivity. For instance, and it can only happen by Amritsar. Yeah.
So I was asking about that. I mean, as a dry port, are they developing Raja Sansi, or there is some news there, right? Which I am sorry, it's not my area, so I'm missing it. No, so you can educate us about that. Yeah.
No, it's not specifically but of late, I don't think there's any tangible sort of development in that area. In fact, even when you look at the connectivity with Afghanistan in 2017, they had built, these trade air corridors, basically for trade between India and Afghanistan. So, in fact, a lot of people had been saying that apart from Mumbai, Delhi, Amritsar should also be one. Have one such trade corridor with Kabul, with Herat, and all that. So it wasn't included in that. Now, if at the official level, if I'm not privy to something, I don't know. But otherwise, it is not at this point of time getting the attention which it deserves from the angle of not just regional connectivity, but even a connectivity for the diaspora. But recently, one international airlines has taken an important initiative. That is, I think, Scoot of Singapore. So what they have done is that they have a flight from I think Amritsar, Singapore, then till Vancouver. So that will help in servicing the passengers from Canada. I mean, tourists from Canada, who want to come to Punjab directly. So they can first, I think, come to Singapore, then they can go.
Yeah. But going back to the topic where we were, do you see a possibility going forward? See, what has happened as a result of the Ukraine war, the Russia-Ukraine war, is actually NATO has been shown to be small. It could not really counter it. And like right now, Europe is facing a crisis of both food grain as well as gas. And Russia is sitting on the gas, they were thinking of exporting from Odessa port again, while they are at war. So the geopolitical power relations have shifted. Biden is going lower on his rankings. I mean, the recent visit to Taiwan was actually to shore up those rankings.
Right.
So there is a crisis happening there. Do you see a new set of powers emerging? And if it is, like, where would we in the world, in the globe, look at the non-Western powers which are emerging? Where would you locate that? I mean, is it Middle East? Is it Dubai? Is it UAE? Where is it?
I think that's a very good question. So, first of all, I think now the narrative will shift. I think, the conventional IR terms about being powers, great power, middle power, that to some extent is passé. It is all issue based to some. And in fact, and the importance of swing states is increasing, I think. And in that, I would like to, to cut, I mean, I won't keep it too long. I think some of the Middle Eastern states are becoming very important. I mean, if you look at Qatar, for instance, on so many issues, it's intervened. And what I think as students of geopolitics, what really is fascinating for all is that earlier in the Middle East, for instance, it was Saudi Arabia which was taken for granted, that they dominated Saudi Arabia and Israel. Now Qatar has upstaged them, and UAE also, not so much geopolitically, but because of its economic development, but because of being in sync with the times. And in fact, recently, one of the interesting things, for instance, was that for the handling of the airports in Afghanistan, it is a UAE-based company, which has been handed over, not a Qatari company. So while our eyes are always on the great powers, on China, on US, and so on and so forth, it is some of these swing states which are beginning to play a very important role. And I think in any case, the Western notion of IR about great power, middle power, for some time, I think that has become passé now. It's okay as a starting point, but in the current, for understanding the geopolitical situation right now, I think that's incomplete. That's tough too.
Thank you, guys, for taking over. Can you hear me okay now? Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks for fielding that question. So, or to Tridevesh, and essentially I was going to ask that, and how do we get the new diasporas? Earlier diasporas used to be very Malaysia and Kenya based, and they were then there were Western diasporas were coming in, and you had mentioned the farmers' protest part, that how the global diaspora has kicked in, and he has already answered this. How can Dubai or other Middle Eastern places can become another mini hubs for Panjabis and Sikhs, because they're already there for either businesses or laborers, but then how can they be brought into policy matters? Amandeep, going back to you, what I was asking when I got disconnected was, so there is obviously a political consciousness going on, but there is a political crisis in Punjab. There is an electoral crisis if you look at the last 3 months of Indian Punjab as well as on the other side of Wagah border, but we'll stay on the Indian side. There is also an intellectual crisis in Punjab, even in farmers' protests. What was really coming out? We eventually have to deal with the government, with the policymaker, with the pragmatic solutions. There is also a governance crisis, because the Sikh institutions, the institutions are performing well. Just because this is on the very Akalis just celebrated 100 years of their setting up of the political party at Akal Takht, at Sri Akal Takht, to represent the Sikh political rights. They changed that in 1995 in the Moga conference. So the Sikh sentiments are wondering, and I want to take your take from a historical angle as well as in the recent election angle, that are all these crises which we are talking about, are they primarily due to the Akali politics we are witnessing in front of, especially in last year?
Yes, to a great extent, yes, because they were not only spearheading the Sikh aspiration, but they were also fiddling with the aspiration. They were also aspiring for other things than what the Sikhs were actually aspiring for. Last 25 years, there has been a power of one family on the matters of Sikhs and the SGPC and the Akal Takht side. Sorry to say that. But yes, it is related to them. There is no doubt about it. But, I think, again, naming something, naming what is wrong is very important to be able to analyze what to do about it. But this naming has been going on since at least 2015, if not before, because ever since the sacrilege incidents, the Bear the Bees, we are quite clear now what has been going on here. They were discredited in 2017 elections, 2019 elections, 2022 elections. They recently had a conference in which, except the Supremo, the whole party is being reorganized, which is actually a farce because the problem is that they have been holding on the reins of the party for too long. But to me, that is not the only issue here. I think there is a deeper crisis, and that goes back to the first question that you asked. Is it like, are we are we primed to battle and not strategize? Are we primed to fight all the time and not develop our own thinking? Are we giving in to easy factionalism between ourselves and not taking the bull by its horns, so to say? I think that is where we need to reflect as people, because the leaders will come and go. But what does a community together want? Where is that space in the community where I can look at and say, okay, this is what the community wants? We don't have a convergence of ideas from our little pockets where we sit in, and then we hold on to grudges for way too long. I think this is, one can understand it psychologically why this is so, but that's not helping us anymore. And that is again why I emphasized on a rethinking has to happen ground up. And on the basis of that, we need to see how to, and if Akalis are not relevant, they will follow. There has been a Singh Sabha movement 2.0 due for the last 20 years at least, and that will happen. And that's okay. But somebody needs to come up, ground up, and be able to represent the aspirations of the Sikhs and all Punjabis for that matter, because the region is such, we are in crisis.
Yeah. Amandeep, I get your point, and I fully get that. And you had earlier shared that a regional party in Punjab is needed, which understands what Punjab needs and can represent the Punjab, all factions. Here, I brought in Akalis more because Akalis used to be that consistent force for 100 years. And in post-47 India, Indian side, they were the force until 80s, and they had their own, generally speaking, three veins. And it was when hegemony was developed within the Akalis, and it was this elements of that this is a family business and the family will own Akalis, and that has brought this kind of a distraught. So Akalis need their own sort of a revivalism. But I'll take it to the last point, and apologies to the viewers. We will take your cues in another 5 to 7 minutes. These are my last questions to both of them. So Amandeep, Akalis need revival. Punjab needs its own party. Maybe other than Akalis, some other Sikh party can be developed, which is more honest and can have a better governance and the better aspirations of its people, especially the Sikhs. But we recently saw again a battle, and again a battle which was won. And it was celebrated across party lines and across, I would say, religious lines, and to certain level, social strata lines as well. So this new environmental consciousness, which has been witnessed within last month in Punjab through the Mattewada campaign of saving the forest, what kind of positive, sort of maybe a little bit more prescriptive sharings you can do, even in the darkest period, even when government is not working, even when governance and other crises are looming, including Akali crisis, this environmental consciousness just brought us a quick success. Can this be modeled to create some other immediate successes while the long-term plans are being shuffled within the communities and organizations and parties?
Oh, definitely. See, the real issue with Punjab is that everything is interwoven with each other. बहुत सारियां गंढा पईयां हुईयां ने पता नहीं लगता पहली गंढ केड़ी खोलनी है. One you open one and then you can open the others. So the Mattewada or environment is and will remain a great starting point, because finally this is the largest crisis that Punjab faces. It is becoming a desert, and we need to stop that from happening. It's partly becoming a desert because we have been growing paddy all these years, which have been feeding India, but we have not been eating it, but our water has been going down. It is becoming a desert for industrial pollution. It's becoming a desert for very, very low forest cover and various other reasons. So Mattewada was brilliant. In one day, the government reversed its stand. But I would like to remind that just like Mattewada, because it deserves a higher pedestal in ranking of agitations, but there were 3 or 4 other farmers' protests that also got results within one day. See, everybody has realized that these people, if they get right now, there's a protest going on outside Jalandhar over sugar dues in the Doaba region. And today, I think Bhagwant Mann released out of 295 another 100 crore for it. I think they realize that the people have become conscious, the people are willing to fight, and the people, as they saw last year, can stay on and keep fighting. And they will have the arsenal with them. That should actually be the starting point to do anything that we want to do here. The issue is that environment is not environment alone. Environment is linked to rivers, then links to river waters, then linked to power capacity, then linked to agrarian policies, then linked to how much outlay the government is willing to spend, economics, So everything is linked, but taking the environment path, to me, and the political action committee, which sort of spearheaded the Mattewala, plus many individuals also, definitely credit to all of them together. But they are now starting something on the Buddha Nala Darya also, They are starting something in every district of Punjab. And this is how I think there is a great spark here. And we must again bring in the entire strength of, as a writer, the strength of narrative to back it up. And everybody can bring their strengths to it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, we are discussing 47, where largest migration, rapes, lootings, killings are the horror images we have. And even in answering this question, you says, Ganda badiyan hai, kithe kholi hai? There are too many knots. And as soon as you said that, people of Punjab, even in 70s, Jansangh of Punjab in Jalandhar, and when I visit on the other side in Lahore, for example, Sayyid Najam Hussain Sangat, they all read Sukhmani Sahib of Guru Arjan. And I'm invoking that because people of Punjab read that. It wasn't that only Sikhs were reading Sukhmani. And there the line comes, Tuti Gandan Har Gopal. Ki jehdi tut gayi hai na, ਉਹਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਗੰਢਣਾ ਹੈਗਾ, how to retie what's broken. ਉਹ Gopal ਕਰਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ. And this idea of Gopal is, I think, very instructive for all of us, that it's the idea of Ikoankar, of the one who's taking care. ਜਿਹੜਾ Go is earth or creation, and Pal is caretaker. So if we become the caretakers, not the owners, not the people filled with pride, that idea, and this environmental resurgence, environmental consciousness through Mattewada, and it's a global thing, but in Punjab we are saying this, if we become caretakers of our institutions or parties rather than owners of it, rather than pride-filled ones, then we may be able to go toward these revivals in various things which are broken. I bring the last question to you, Tridevesh, and this is also, I want to end with a more positive notes that, and you have talked about this in your writings, and we have had conversations about this, that Sikhs and Punjabis globally are flourishing. And in this flourishing, there have been many individual successes, personal successes are being seen, and a lot of them are coming into, I think we are seeing the early phases of this community successes, whether it's in politics, whether it's in developing philanthropy toward Punjab, even if it's happening through Darbar Sahib complex or village adoption models. So knowing that Sikhs and Punjabis, this applies to both, don't have the Raj of their own currently. Because until 1849 we did, and before that there were various trials of that. What is the soft power which Punjabis and Sikhs can exercise in order to develop this sort of pre-47 understandings and within the national confines of India and Pakistan? So the roles of diaspora, the roles of Sikhs within India and Punjab, and the roles of Punjabis globally. How can we exercise our soft power better?
So we've obviously over the past couple of years, as we've been discussing, we've seen it in different forms. I think the Kartarpur religious corridor is one dimension of it. The role played by Sikhs globally during the COVID-19 pandemic, the seva, that was also recognized. I think there are two things. One is at an intellectual narrative, for the global audience. In terms of globally, I think Sikhs have a lot in terms of the global economic narrative, that where there's this increasing talk, inequalities and so on and so on. So I think this a model of economic growth which has space for enterprise, but also which can check these growing inequalities, and where the emphasis is not just purely on profit. So that is, in terms of economic terms, that is one area. That's one way of doing it. The second is also, I think, one challenge which I didn't point out earlier. It's not directly linked to this, but I think there is also an issue of not just ideological divide, but also in terms of when you look at the diaspora, different, the professions and the influence on the overall Sikh narrative. So when I spoke about the diaspora, for instance, in, places like Malaysia or in UAE, in Singapore, it was also about bringing in that narrative of, the entrepreneurship of enterprise, which you have pointed out to. You need a balance of both. You can always tilt one way depending upon the economic cycle, but you need a balance of both. And apart from the diaspora outside, I think even the Punjabi diaspora within India outside is also sort of soft power, because some of them have done very well. You have to include them in the conversation as well. So I would say one is what we have already discussed, on taking on, so whether it was Islamophobia, whether it was COVID, the other is now contributing to the broader economic debate, by one is obviously through the Sikh thought, that is for Sikh scholars to do, but otherwise also these success stories, there is a link to the Sikh spirit of resilience. And I'd like to point out that some of the success stories actually are, while on the one hand, obviously Punjab has suffered a lot. There is no this thing, but you also have post 1947 Punjabis, including Sikhs, who without any concessions, without anything, they post 1947, they built up big businesses within India, and that is an example of resilience. That also is an example. Obviously it doesn't come into the modern day soft power, but I thought I should flag this point because often we forget the resilience of those who suffered during partition, and without concessions, without anything, on their own, by their own wits, they developed, and through the hard work they achieved a lot.
Well, thank you for that. And we are also seeing that finally within last decade there's a partition museum which is talking about some of the voices from that time. We have a 47 archive which is recording multiple narratives regardless of individuals' religious or I'll just call it religious backgrounds and economic backgrounds. We're also seeing, even this week, I was just looking at the coverage which, in addition to the nationalism stuff which goes on, even Hindu newspaper has published articles in their weekend magazines regarding partition voices, which include all of these things. Thank you both, Tridesh and Amandeep, for conversation. I want to take up some of the audience questions. One of the first comments which came up, and I just want to acknowledge that it's not a question, and we agree. It was basically saying we need to have a precision and clarity around the terms like nation, state, country, union, empire, and calling India a nation is a misrepresentation. Constitutionally, it is defined as a union. In reality, it behaves like an empire. Look, we acknowledge that these terms are loaded. Indigenous term in Punjab used to be Raj, and we understand that term, but depending on whether it's an academic study, whether how constitution even within India have been changed, it had become in 70s socialist republic actually. These terms are fluid, these terms are legal, but they also have academic understandings as well as legal understandings, and we understand that, and we were using these terms more loosely today in our conversations for the public benefit. But here's our first question. It's from Jim in London, and he says, given the commonality of some aspects of language, culture, and heritage, what can be done to develop a non-religious feeling of a pan-Punjabi identity across both India and Pakistan? Aman, would you like to take this?
Yeah, because it's very dear to me, and it sadly I don't see this line of argument developing. I mean, we lament that Punjabi is dying. We lament that schools are not teaching Punjabi. We lament that children are not following up on Gurmukhi. But to me, very frankly, a language is related to markets. If an individual can thrive in a language, they will learn the language. And to me, it is very important that every individual be able to be monolingual and be able to exist. They don't have to learn another language. Like what is Punjab now doing? It's trying to learn English and go off somewhere abroad, But I think it is if these two Punjabs, and that relates to Ridhavesh's point, if they develop trade together, then we are such a big strength that we actually can exist within the language, and the language will grow. And that is a point I've emphasized it in the book, I've been trying to talk about it, but we don't need to look at it as what is not happening, but as what we can happen, what we must do, and how to develop a market in Punjabi, and automatically the language will grow, and that would be non-religious.
That's a great point. Thank you for sharing that. And I also recall that go ahead.
Just a footnote. I mean, Urdu developed like that.
Yes. And I think one of the things what we actually may not appreciate it fully, Punjabi is the only language in the history, at least in last 1,000 years, we can see, when it has never been a state language. So the kind of development which is needed in order for language to come together from a governance angle, from economic, and there are efforts going on. I just want to mention that I think Guru Nanak Sahib and Sikhs have a lot to do with bringing Punjabi to this level, where even the Sikh states did not have Punjabi as its language, but the Gurus adopted it to the large extent, among other languages. But they also reminded us it's the language of love which you're interested in. But each Guru's project was in Punjab. I think the current efforts are there. I'm looking at, and I participate in some of those, that the books which are used to be only in Shahmukhi, their Punjabi Gurmukhi versions are coming up on the Western Punjab side, and they're also asking for more and more books. Whether it's the institutions like Pilak are coming up, whether it's the musicians who are trying to talk about both sides of the border equally. I think it's the state and the nations which they are in, which is not allowing much of it. But if through education, through what Amandeep mentioned, and through some of the trade routes, that may be possible. Moving on to this question, Tridesh, is for you. This is from Hargobind in Kuala Lumpur. So here you go. You're going beyond India and Pakistan here. And he says that bilateral trade between Punjab and Pakistan, what I think he means is Indian Punjab to the Pakistani Punjab, would seem like a dangerous idea to the central government. how can this concept be escalated to the powers that be to a point where we could possibly see implementation?
Okay, so you see, as I said, I mean, before 2019, before February 2019, you can say that trade, bilateral trade was, I mean, it was obviously not at the level with which it should be, but it was going in the right direction. It's after 2019 that there has been a dip. Now we need to recognize a couple of things. One, obviously, there is a lot of opposition on this side, but we also need to be mindful. You know, what happens is that sometimes our biases take over and we don't look at the facts. There is also opposition from lobbies on the other side. So technically, actually, trade was snapped in August 2019 by the other side. So what the Indian side did was it imposed tariffs, removed MF, and made it virtually, impossible to have any reasonable level. And then Pakistan did that. So apart from, obviously, as I've already said, that you need to articulate this, you need to create interest in business lobbies, which across the board, and this also will require a bit of bipartisanship. Whether, for instance, can you get all political parties of Punjab on board? Because in the past, there have been times where even the BJP local units of Punjab have included this as a demand, opening up of. So can you do that sort of thing? That is one. And second, you also need to understand that on the other side, there is some amount of apprehension. It's not that they don't want bilateral trade, but they're very, like you have in India, there are lobbies which are wary of competition. So that side also needs to be addressed. But if there are synergies, the business lobbies, they will open up right away. But if there are not, then there will be certain areas where Pakistan also needs to first convince its domestic constituencies. So the problem is on both sides. So obviously, on our side, it requires political articulation. There, it's only when you reach a point for them when it becomes imperative that you need to open up and give up. There are already instances. So as I said, in 2021, they were about to open up trade. Recently, the Pakistan Prime Minister also said that opening up, he has alluded to it in some form. Bilawal Bhutto has also done it. I really don't see full-fledged trade, bilateral trade happening. But yes, in an incremental manner, it will probably begin via essential commodities and then can move on to the next level.
Thank you for that. And these are the pragmatic realities, right? None of us are suggesting that it is this or that. There are multiple things needed, including at the trade level, because at the end of the day, the Pakistan is an Islamic republic and they have a larger concentration of their constituencies and they have to solve many things within Pakistan. Punjab is only one of the issues they're dealing with. Similarly, on the Indian side, the larger constituency is not Sikhs or Punjab, as we discussed today, and they have to solve many things on the Indian side. But this is where certain things can be done by central or federal or national governments, which is what Ridesh is alluding to. Next question is from GP in Bahrain. Okay, so we are getting a Middle Eastern question. It's getting interesting today. It's good to see that because usually they get dominated by US, UK, and Canada, and maybe that's the Sikh dominance. Over representing the soft power. So it's good to see that today. And Gurpreet says that despite growing political consciousness and winning narrative war, he meant winning narrative war, the dominance of Hindutva Brahmanical ideology is growing. So is it that Brahmanism drives its strength from united India? We have seen the abuse of central agencies, whether it's forces, judiciary, election commission, media, intelligence agencies, to gain dominance of Hindutva. Things are going from bad to worse. So is there a hope of liberation for minorities, Dalits, tribals in united India? Amandeep?
I said you fight because you hope. And I mean, you obviously can't leave out more than 80% of the population and just keep benefiting the 5 to 7% class, which is like the Brahmin and the Baniya class. Whatever devices you might bring in, I mean, the Manusmriti or, the caste or gender, they use all these to basically exploit everyone, bring up this sense of united India. As I said, GDP to DP, this whole Tiranga is being used for. But they're very well entrenched now. And I think at two levels. It's not only that they win elections or they buy out, they buy out opposition members, and they make governments. In many states, they have done that. But they're entrenched in different way, that their own Hindutva project has been going on actively at least for the last 30, 40 years. And they have entrenched themselves in levels of bureaucracy where they now, once they got into power, they could very easily, like termites eat away the wood of this country called India. And that is the crisis. That if they win elections, they don't have policies. But if anywhere they lose elections, they are very notorious opposition. They don't let governments function. I mean, look at UPA 2, 2007 to 2014, 2009 to 2014. They don't let governments function. They don't do anything themselves. And this is the rot that has set into Indian society. But you fight. Sometimes suddenly, just like Maharashtra, they toppled the government by changing the leader of the party. Here, the next day, Nitish Kumar gave them a jolt in Bihar. So in politics, one day is a big time and 1 week is a long time. And things happen, but it doesn't stop with coming to power or not coming to power. The rot that has set in, the education that masses of people need, the sense which Punjab got through its political consciousness, that we will throw away the yoke that binds us down. That will take much longer to seep into India, and I just hope it doesn't implode before that.
Well, and the ratings for India and Pakistan are converging. Whether we look at economics, ease of doing businesses, to press freedom, and things of that nature. So what you were said, equivalent of that, and I don't want to create false equivalents. Similar things are happening on the other side of the border, and this is the stark reality of South Asia. In this stark reality of South Asia, what are your closing comments? 1 minute each. Amandeep?
Well, I think we should have these conversations, and I'm glad that I think I would leave it at a high note. I mean, recently PEN America asked me to write for them, and I wrote something which was, the same. The दाग दाग उजाला ये सब गजीदा शहर वो इंतजार था जिसका ये वो शहर तो नहीं. I said Faiz would now be looking at noon, and that was dawn, and this is noon now of that शहर तो नहीं, So they're dark times, very challenging times, but this is happening beyond Punjab, beyond India. It is happening worldwide. And normally we grew up thinking that we will make a better world, but I think we need to recalibrate ourselves and say, let us hold on to a better world that we knew, and let us try to then keep it in place, and maybe the next generation will build on it.
Thank you, Aman. Tridesh?
So I think the first part is obviously there are a lot of concerns. So you can't use the word, you can't be optimistic as such, but you need to flag your concerns, but also not lose sight of what may seem small wins, but are significant wins, especially in the context of Punjab, in the context of the Sikhs over the last 2 to 3 years. Now, any major big bang change obviously takes time, but we can't lose sight of that. And also, I think you have to be ready for the good fight always. So I would neither be very optimistic. There is a lot to be concerned about, but at the same time, I think Punjab has the potential of showing the way, not just within India, but even in the context of South Asia.
Well, thank you, Tridesh. You spoken like a policy analyst, and Amandeep spoken like an author. So that's how those are your prime traits. You do many other things. Both of you do that. Look, all I can say is before I pass it on to Manvinder is, Professor Puan Singh has written somewhere in 100 years ago, where he says, "Punjab jiha mulk mainu koi aur na dista," and he's a poem called Punjab Desh Pyar Ware. And this idea of Punjab as we have been discussing primarily in last 75 years and primarily in last 30 years of truncated Punjab, but it's much bigger. And perhaps we need to look at extrapolating some of that instead of looking at it in a smaller confine, which we have now gotten used to, and looking at this larger civilization and how that civilization has been reduced to the current realities in the post-British India. The second thing I would mention, and the last thing, is that mental health is back on our minds. We talk about many things. We think about many things. It's depressing to look at certain things. At the same time, we look for the light. And the light I leave with is that Guru Sahib has a shabad in Guru Granth Sahib where he says, Man pardesi jethiye, sab des paraya. That if we become foreigners in our own mind, the outsiders in our own mind, then regardless of which nation, state, Raj, republic, country, union, territory, and whatever other words we can use, we are living in, they will always remain foreign, whether it's an indigenous rule by people of our kind, our ideology, none of that will matter if our mind is foreign. So I think that gives us something to recalibrate, as the word Amandeep had used, and to be pragmatic, as Tridesh was implying. Hopefully, the next 75 years, some of you get to do more conversations on and perhaps pick an element to work on so the next decade becomes better for the Sikhs, for the Punjabis, and for the larger South Asia. Thank you, Manvinder, for closing.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'll just do a quick closing as I know we're running out of time. On behalf of SikhRI, I thank Amandeep Singh, Harinder Singh, Tridevish Singh, and our Sangat today. Thank you all for tuning in and for spending this time with us, for your questions. Thank you, and apologies to those whose questions were not addressed due to time constraints. I'll just give you a little sneak peek of our next webinar. So next month on September 17th, we'll be hosting a webinar titled Border Crossings. You can register at sikhri.org/events. We'll reflect on the enduring effects of partition through a conversation with third-generation partition descendants from India and Pakistan, who are also oral historians doing the work of memory. So we'll explore how their memory work both transcends and is contained by national borders and boundaries, and how it challenges the divide between this and that. So I think something interesting about our presenters, so Anshul Malhotra, Anam Zakaria, Anshul is an Indian author and Anam is a Pakistani author, and the conversation will be moderated by Shruti Devgan, who's moderated for us before. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Again, you can register at sikhri.org/events. And just to finally close this out, as always, a recording of today's webinar will be available and emailed out to everyone within 24 hours. Thank you for joining in today. Today's webinar will be ending now. Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
You were listening to SikhCast by Sikh Research Institute, illuminating every path.